The message arrived so quietly, so casually, that if I hadn't been standing right there, I might have missed it entirely. But life has a way of showing you the truth at the exact moment you're finally strong enough to face it. My husband was in the kitchen, humming to himself as though the world outside that little tune didn't exist. The smell of garlic and butter floated through the air, wrapping the room in a warmth that felt comforting, until it didn't. Until one single vibration on his phone sliced through that comfort like a blade. I remember turning my head automatically, the way anyone does when they hear a notification. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't searching for secrets. I wasn't expecting anything except maybe a silly meme from his friend group or a message from his boss asking for a late night update. But the moment I saw the name glowing on the lock screen, something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not violently, just shifted, as if my heart recognized a threat before my mind could catch up, and then I saw the message, "I miss you," 3 words, innocent if written by a child, playful if sent by a sibling. But devastating when typed by a woman who works with your husband, a woman he had never once mentioned outside of casual office talk. My breath didn't stop. No, it deepened, sank, grew heavy. There's a difference between suspicion and confirmation. Suspicion whispers, confirmation screams in complete silence. I stood there, staring at the screen, feeling my pulse thudding in my fingertips. My husband continued chopping vegetables, scraping them into a pan as though the world had not just yanked the ground out from under our marriage. His voice floated through the room, light and carefree. It felt surreal, almost theatrical, like I was watching a man play the role of a loving husband, unaware that the stage curtains were about to collapse on him. I picked up the phone, not out of anger, but out of clarity. A strange, cold stillness washed over me, a stillness I never knew I was capable of. There is a moment in every woman's life when naivete burns away, leaving behind truth, sharp, undeniable, and merciless. This was mine. My fingers hovered over the screen, trembling. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of revelation. I opened the message thread. What I saw wasn't a one-time slip. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Their messages formed a trail of secrets, each one darker than the last. Hidden lunches, inside jokes, late night conversations, lines crossed and erased without hesitation. And then, without thinking, without planning, without giving myself time to soften the blow, I typed those words, "Come over, my wife isn't home today." A sentence that wasn't mine, but one he would have said. One she was clearly waiting to hear. A strange calm settled over me, as though a storm had just stopped midair. My decision wasn't impulsive, it was instinctual. When a woman sees the truth in front of her, she doesn't negotiate with it. She acts. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been, and then I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching my husband, watching the man who had shared years of promises with me, watching the man who had taken vows with me, watching the man who, at that moment, looked so small and unaware. He smiled when he saw me, a sweet, ordinary smile, the kind that once made my heart flutter. But that day, it felt like a mask he had forgotten he was wearing. "Dinner will be ready in 15, he said. 15 minutes. 15 minutes before his entire double life walked right up to our front door. As I watched him move around the kitchen, I felt something peculiar, a detachment. It was like I was observing a stranger in a familiar space. The man I thought I knew was dissolving in front of me, piece by piece, with every memory I replayed, every late night, every unexplained phone call. Every moment my intuition whispered and I silenced it, but not today. Today, the truth had stepped into the light and there was no pushing it back into the shadows. The house felt different, quieter, colder, even though nothing had physically changed. A single message had altered the atmosphere, cracked something that could never be glued back the same way. I heard the faint ticking of the wall clock, each second dragging, stretching, amplifying the anticipation I didn't want but couldn't escape. My mind raced, but not in panic. No, it was calculating, remembering, evaluating every moment of our life together. There is a certain kind of heartbreak that doesn't destroy you. It awakens you, and that awakening was spreading through me like wildfire. I walked into the living room, each step deliberate. I didn't pace, I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I simply existed in the truth. I sat on the couch, folded my hands, and waited. It felt like I was waiting for a storm I already knew the shape of. 10 minutes passed. My husband called out from the kitchen, asking if I wanted to taste the sauce. His voice sounded distant, muffled by the pounding of reality. 5 more minutes. I heard a car slow down outside. A door shutting, footsteps approaching the house with the confidence of someone who believed she was welcome. Then ding, dong, the doorbell didn't ring, it struck. A sound so sharp, so absolute, it cut through the house like a blade. My husband froze. The wooden spoon slipped from his hand and clattered onto the stove. The color drained from his face in a way I had never seen before. Not during arguments, not during sickness, not during fear. This was different. This was guilt. Pure, naked, undeniable guilt. He turned toward me, eyes wide, as though he already knew exactly who was standing outside. As though his world, which he had tried so hard to keep divided, wife in one corner, coworker in another, had just collided in the worst possible way. And in that silent moment, where everything hung suspended between what was known and what was about to be revealed, I realized something. This message hadn't changed just the room. It had changed everything. There is a certain kind of calm that only comes after a betrayal reveals itself. Not the calm of peace, but the calm of clarity. The kind that settles in your bones when the truth finally stops hiding. That was the calm that washed over me the moment I picked up my husband's phone and typed the words that would unravel everything he had tried to conceal. Come over. My wife isn't home today. It didn't feel like I was typing a message. It felt like I was pulling the truth out of the dark and holding it up to the light where it could no longer escape. My fingers hovered above the screen for only a second, but that second felt like a lifetime. My mind wasn't clouded. My heart wasn't confused. I wasn't panicking, and I wasn't raging. No, I was intentional. Because when a woman finally decides she's done doubting her own intuition, she becomes dangerous to the lies around her. The reply wasn't a trap. The reply wasn't revenge. The reply was a mirror, one that would reflect his deceit back onto him. When I hit send, I didn't expect my heartbeat to steady the way it did. A strange, cold steadiness spread through me, a strength I didn't even know I possessed. His phone buzzed again, almost immediately, as if she had been waiting, anticipating, ready to leap into a moment she thought belonged to her. But I didn't look at the response. I didn't need to. What mattered was that the truth was already in motion, and there was no turning it back. I placed the phone exactly where he had left it on the counter, screen down, as though nothing had happened. It felt symbolic, putting his secret right back where he thought it could stay hidden, even though it was already on its way to blowing wide open. I stood at the edge of the kitchen watching him, completely unaware, completely comfortable, completely committed to the lie he didn't know I had dismantled. He was still humming, still chopping vegetables. Still pretending he was the husband he promised to be, but his phone had already betrayed him, and now so had his own coworker. Every sound in that moment felt amplified. The scrape of the knife, the sizzle of the pan, the soft clink of glass. And beneath it all, something else, the quiet echo of truth approaching. I walked away from the kitchen, letting the weight of the message settle in the room behind me. The living room felt colder, sharper, as if the air itself understood what I had just done. I sat down slowly, my hands folded in my lap, and allowed myself to breathe. Not shallow, shaky breaths, but deep ones that tasted like freedom. Because the moment you stop protecting someone else's lies, you start reclaiming your own voice. The seconds ticked by with heavy anticipation. I could almost feel the coworker's excitement through the walls of my home, the way she must have smiled at the message she believed was from him. Maybe she fixed her hair. Maybe she put on perfume. Maybe she rehearsed what she would say when she walked in. She had no idea she wasn't walking into the arms of a man. She was walking into the truth. As I sat there, my mind drifted backward through conversations that suddenly made more sense. Nights he came home late. Days he seemed distracted. Times he looked guilty but brushed it off with a kiss on my forehead. It was all a puzzle, and the reply I sent was the final piece clicking into place. He didn't know the walls around his secret were crumbling. He didn't know I had stopped believing the stories he told to cover up moments that didn't add up. He didn't know that tonight the truth would walk straight to our front door. Minutes passed, slow and suffocating. My husband stirred the pot, tasted the sauce, hummed the same tune like he always did when he wanted to seem unbothered. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was looking through him, seeing the man behind the mask, seeing the choices he made when he thought no one was watching. I could feel the air shift as time stretched thin. Soon, the reply wouldn't just be a message on a screen. It would be footsteps approaching my door. It would be a knock that shattered whatever illusions remained. Then something unexpected hit me, not sadness, not anger, but relief. Relief that the guessing was over. Relief that the pretending was over. Relief that the truth no longer needed permission to reveal itself. I wasn't going to confront him with screams. I wasn't going to throw the phone at him. I wasn't going to demand explanations. Those reactions give power to the person who betrayed you. And my reply had already taken all that power back. What I did next was simple. I waited, not like a victim, not like a confused wife, but like a woman who finally understood her worth and refused to be played for a fool. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Each second felt like a step closer to the moment everything would change. And then his phone buzzed again, a soft, quick vibration, a confirmation she was coming. I didn't flinch. My husband didn't notice, but the room did. It felt as though the walls themselves had pulled in a breath, preparing for the impact. I heard the faint sound of a car pulling up outside. My heartbeat didn't race. It slowed as if preparing for something inevitable, something necessary. The sound of footsteps on the walkway followed. Light, eager, familiar only to the man who had betrayed me. In that moment, I could almost feel the house holding its breath. Then ding, dong, the reply I sent had finally arrived at my doorstep. The message that exposed the truth was no longer digital, it was physical. It was undeniable. It was standing on the other side of the door. My husband's face turned toward the sound, and when he froze, when the color drained from his cheeks, when his eyes widened in dread, that was the moment I knew. My reply had done exactly what it needed to do. The moments leading up to the doorbell were the quietest and loudest of my life. Quiet in sound, loud in truth. It's strange how a house can feel the same on the outside, yet carry a completely different weight inside its walls. The furniture hadn't moved, the lights hadn't changed, the air conditioner hummed as usual, and still, everything felt different. After sending the message, after placing his phone back where he left it, I walked into the living room like someone stepping out of their own skin. I didn't rush, I didn't tremble. I moved with a clarity so sharp it almost frightened me. The calm didn't come from peace, it came from finality. Like the last inhale before stepping into a storm you know you can no longer avoid. Behind me, my husband was still in the kitchen, humming that same melody. If irony had a sound, it would have been that tune. While his deception unfolded in front of me, he remained blissfully unaware, sautéing vegetables like he hadn't just betrayed our marriage with a careless message and a hidden life. I lowered myself onto the couch, hands folded in my lap. I wasn't waiting like a wife seeking answers. I was waiting like a judge who had already reviewed the evidence. My chest rose and fell steadily, each breath a reminder that I was no longer living in the dark. There is a very particular kind of calm that comes before everything breaks, the calm of knowing there is nothing left to fear. My eyes drifted around the room. The framed photos on the wall, the wedding picture on the shelf, the little souvenirs from trips we took, each one suddenly felt like a prop, part of a staged life I didn't realize I had been performing in. A life filled with moments that were probably real for me, but now tainted by the question, were they real for him? The clock above the fireplace ticked rhythmically, as though counting down to the moment everything would shatter. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the sound seemed louder than usual, each second stretching long and thin like a thread about to snap. In the kitchen, I heard the clatter of a spoon, the bubbling of sauce, the soft thump of cabinet doors opening and closing. It was all so normal, painfully normal, in the moments before the truth arrived like a wrecking ball. I leaned back into the couch, my fingers tightening slightly. My mind wasn't racing. It was calculating, remembering, connecting dots I had ignored for far too long. How many late nights had he blamed on work? How many times had he been too tired, but mysteriously energized the next morning? How many weekends had he insisted on making quick stops to the office that never seemed necessary? The pieces were falling into place with such clarity it almost stung. Across the room, his phone sat silently on the counter, a bomb waiting to explode. He didn't notice it, didn't suspect a thing. He moved casually, blissfully oblivious to the ticking countdown echoing through the house. I watched him from the corner of my eye. He sprinkled seasoning, stirred the pot, took a sip from the wooden spoon as though tasting perfection, and still, he hummed, that humming, sweet, soft, and utterly infuriating. It wasn't the tune itself that bothered me. It was what it represented, normalcy, routine, comfort. His life was still intact. Mine had already cracked open. The calm surrounding me wasn't gentle. It was chilling. Like standing in the eye of a hurricane, stillness so profound it pulses in your ears. A moment where everything holds its breath because the next second will change everything. My phone buzzed. I didn't jump. I didn't panic. I simply turned my head. It was her. On my way, a bold heart at the end. Careless, confident, undeserved. I placed the phone screen down beside me. There was nothing left to check. Nothing left to wonder. The truth was already walking toward my home, wrapped in perfume and assumption. A strange sensation flowed through me, not anger, not heartbreak, but certainty. The certainty that what was about to happen needed to happen. The certainty that the truth would no longer hide behind the fragile excuse of maybe I misunderstood. The certainty that after tonight, things would never be the same again. My husband stepped into the living room for a moment, wiping his hands on a towel. "You okay?" he asked casually. It was almost laughable. How ordinary everything still felt to him. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice steady, calm, almost eerily composed. He nodded and went back into the kitchen, satisfied with my answer, completely unaware that his entire world was minutes away from collapsing. I watched him disappear behind the doorway, watched the top of his head as he bent over the stove. Calm around me thickened, settling deeper into my bones. Outside, a car engine slowly rumbled closer. I recognized the sound, the familiar hum of her car, the one she bragged about upgrading at work last month. The headlights brushed against the window as she pulled up. My breathing slowed even more. This was the calm before the impact, the breath before the scream of truth, the moment of stillness before the floor falls out beneath someone who thought they were safe. I closed my eyes for just a second, allowing the weight of everything to settle, allowing myself to feel the shift in the air, the heaviness, the inevitability, the sharp-edged tension of betrayal finally revealing itself. Her footsteps approached the porch, light, confident, almost skipping. She thought she was walking towards something forbidden and thrilling, but she had no idea she was walking straight into the truth. Inside, my husband hummed the final note of his melody, then ding, dong, the doorbell rang, and the calm, thick and suffocating, shattered like glass. There's no title or section to expand. To continue the story, I need to know which part you want next. For example, the doorbell that silenced everything, the moment his double life collided, and what happened when I opened the door. The moment the doorbell rang, time didn't just slow, it fractured. It stretched thin and sharp, like a glass sheet about to shatter with the slightest touch. The sound echoed through the house, bouncing off the walls, slicing through the air, cutting straight into the fragile illusion my husband had been living in. And in that instant, everything, every lie, every message, every secret, collided all at once. My husband froze. It wasn't a dramatic freeze, not the way people do in movies. His body didn't turn to stone. His eyes didn't widen immediately. No, this was slower, deeper, more revealing. He stiffened first, as if someone had pulled an invisible string tight inside his chest. His shoulders lifted slightly, then locked in place. The wooden spoon he'd been holding dripped sauce onto the floor, but he didn't notice. His mind had already left the kitchen. I watched him from the couch, watched the realization creep up his spine like a cold hand. He didn't have to check the phone. He didn't have to guess. He knew. On some level, he knew exactly who was at our door. His double life, one he thought he had so carefully divided into neat compartments, was about to meet itself face to face. He turned his head slowly, as though afraid that moving too fast would confirm the truth he was desperately trying not to face. His eyes met mine for a moment, and in them, I saw something I had never seen so clearly before: fear. Not fear of losing me, not fear of hurting me, fear of exposure. Fear that the fantasies he'd built in secret had taken physical form and were now standing on his doorstep, ringing the bell with the confidence of someone who believed she belonged there. Ding-dong, the second ring was sharper, more impatient, more familiar. My husband swallowed hard. I could hear it. From across the room, a thick, dry, strangled swallow that sounded exactly like guilt. He took a step toward the living room, then stopped. His hands hovered helplessly in the air, as if he didn't know what to do with them. His breathing quickened. His eyes darted to the window, then to the kitchen entrance, then to the hallway, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Because the truth doesn't knock politely on your door. It comes in even if you aren't ready. I didn't move from the couch. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I simply watched as the world he had built in shadows began to collapse under the weight of its own lies. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Just a soft gasp, barely audible, another step, another freeze, another flicker of panic. It was as if he wanted to run to the door, to the back of the house, to anywhere that wasn't here. But he couldn't, because the moment she arrived, the two lives he had been juggling finally collided, smashing into each other with the force of betrayal, and I was the witness. He looked at me again, this time with a different expression, one that begged. Begged for a warning, begged for a hint, begged for a lie that might save him. But I wasn't in the business of protecting his secrets anymore. I held his gaze steady and emotionless, and that silence, my silence, was louder than any accusation. It told him everything he needed to know. I know. He took a shaky breath, wiped his palms against his jeans, and forced himself toward the front door. Every step he took looked heavier than the last, as if his legs didn't want to move, as if his body knew exactly what was waiting for him on the other side. Ding, dong, the third ring carried impatience. Familiarity, a hint of frustration, as though she were wondering what was taking him so long, but this time she wasn't calling for him. She was calling for the truth. My husband reached the door, hesitated, and pressed his palm against it as though he needed support just to stand. His chest rose and fell rapidly, breaths shallow and panicked. He stood there, hand on the doorknob, gathering what was left of his courage. I watched him with a stillness he didn't understand, a stillness that came from clarity, a stillness that came from the truth finally having room to breathe. He turned the knob slowly. When he opened the door, just a few inches, the air in the house shifted. The scent of her perfume drifted inside, sweet, floral, confident. A scent he recognized, a scent he had grown comfortable with, a scent that did not belong in my home. She smiled brightly, leaning forward slightly. "Hey," she said, her voice soft and intimate, the kind of hey, reserved for someone whose arms she expected to be in within seconds. But the moment her eyes met his, her smile faltered, not because she saw me, she hadn't noticed me yet, but because his face wasn't the face of a man thrilled to see her. It was the face of a man whose world was crashing down. She tilted her head. "Is everything okay?" He opened his mouth, but again, no sound. Then she stepped forward, about to walk into the house as though she belonged there, and that's when her eyes finally met mine. The color drained from her cheeks instantly. Her lips parted, not in greeting but in shock. She froze mid-step, her confidence evaporating as quickly as his had minutes earlier. Her gaze darted between the two of us, trying to piece together what was happening. My husband stammered, she blinked rapidly, and I sat there composed, calm, untouched by the chaos unraveling in front of me. That was the moment his double life collided, violently, unexpectedly, irreversibly. The lies he told her about me, the lies he told me about her, the lies he told himself about what he could get away with. They all slammed into each other, forming a storm that neither of them could hide from anymore. Her expression shifted from confusion to realization to horror. His expression mirrored hers, but with guilt layered so thick it was almost painful to look at. He whispered her name. She whispered his. Both sounded broken, but mine remained silent, because silence speaks louder when the truth is standing right in front of you, shaking, exposed, and undeniable. In that single moment, with the door open and their faces pale with dread, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. There is no greater justice than a lie confronting the truth face to face. When I rose from the couch, the room felt different, charged, electric, trembling beneath the weight of what was about to unfold. My husband stood frozen at the open door, his body blocking only half the frame, as if he wanted to shield her from me and me from her. But it was too late. The truth had already walked in. The damage was already done. I took my time standing up, slowly, purposefully, not because I was weak, but because control tastes sweeter when you savor it. Every step I took toward the door was steady, unhurried, deliberate. My husband's eyes widened with each inch I moved, like he was watching a storm approach, a storm he created but never expected to face. His coworker, standing just outside, looked like a woman suspended between two realities, the fantasy she thought she was walking into and the disaster she had actually stepped toward. I stopped just behind him, my presence a quiet thunder. He flinched when he felt me near, as if my silence had weight, as if my stillness was louder than any scream he imagined. "And what do we have here?" I said softly, not angry, not broken, just aware. My voice made her jump. My calmness made him crumble. He turned his face slightly toward me, his lips trembling. His voice cracked on my name, but nothing coherent came out. It didn't matter. I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at her, and she couldn't meet my eyes for more than a second at a time. Her confidence had evaporated. The playful smirk she had worn when she rang the doorbell was gone. In its place was a dawning panic, one that spread across her features like ink bleeding through paper. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand slightly, a small, subtle gesture, enough to silence her completely. I stepped closer, my eyes fixed on hers, and gently pushed the door open wider. Not slamming it, not yanking it, just opening it, inviting the truth into the light where it could no longer hide. "Come in," I said, my voice steady enough to make both of them flinch, her breath caught in her throat. My husband took half a step back, shaking his head slightly, as if he wanted her to stay outside, to keep the worlds apart just a little longer. But I wasn't protecting his duplicity anymore. She hesitated, one foot in, one foot out, stranded between guilt and denial. She looked at him for guidance, for permission, for reassurance. But the moment their eyes met, she saw something she hadn't expected. He wasn't in control anymore. He wasn't the confident, smooth, soft-talking man she knew at work. He wasn't the charmer who sent her messages in the dark. He was terrified. Finally, she stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind her with a soft thud that echoed louder than a gunshot. It was the sound of truth sealing itself inside the house. My husband attempted to speak first. "Listen. Let me explain. Don't." I whispered, just one word, sharp, precise, final. His mouth snapped shut instantly. She shifted nervously, wringing her hands, biting her lip, scanning the room as if the truth might be written somewhere on the walls. The silence grew thicker, almost suffocating her. "Does she know?" She whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes darting toward him. I almost laughed, almost. Instead, I stepped forward, closing the distance between the three of us until they had no choice but to face what they had created together. "He didn't tell me," I said, tilting my head. "You did." Her eyes widened. "Me?" I nodded. "Your message." She blinked rapidly, realizing exactly what had happened. My husband turned pale. "Wait. You replied, yes." I cut him off. "I did. And she came running the moment she thought you were alone." His shoulders sagged. Her hands flew to her mouth. Everything they thought they could hide had unraveled with one single message. I looked at her, not with hatred, not with pity, but with clarity. "So tell me," I said quietly, "when you texted my husband that you miss him, did you miss him enough to face his wife?" Her knees nearly buckled. She stammered, I didn't know. He told me you two were not together anymore." The familiar lie. My husband flinched again, turning toward her. I just said that because liars always need a story," I finished. He looked at me, eyes pleading. "Please, just let me. You've talked enough." I told him, my voice low but firm. "Tonight, I listen, you face." He closed his mouth, defeated. I turned to her. "You walked in here thinking you were stepping into a secret romance. What you stepped into is the truth." She swallowed hard. I'm sorry, I didn't want. You wanted what wasn't yours." I said softly, "And he let you." My husband dropped his head, her eyes filled with tears. Not for him, not for me, but for herself, realizing she had been played just as much. The truth is, when a man lies, he doesn't lie to just one woman. He lies to both. I stepped back, giving both of them space, watching the tension suffocate every inch of the room. Tears slid down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to ruin your marriage." "You didn't ruin anything," I said calmly. "You simply exposed it." My husband whispered my name, but I didn't look at him. He didn't deserve my gaze, not tonight. "You know what hurts the most," I said quietly, "not the betrayal, not the message, not even the lies." They both looked up at me, expecting something dramatic. "It's realizing," I continued, "that the person you trusted wasn't special, just careless." He flinched like I had slapped him. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped aside. "Leave," I told her. She hesitated only a moment before rushing out, tears streaming down her face, the perfume she wore trailing behind her like the last remnants of a broken illusion. My husband stood there, trembling, guilty, exposed, alone. "And as for you," I said, my voice steady, "we're not done, not yet." Because the truth had walked through my door tonight, but the consequences were just beginning.